Welcome back to Combat Mission Shock Force 2, where we're going to take a quick look at the British Army's FV510 Warrior. In a lot of ways, the Warrior is underwhelming. This isn't to say that it's a poor vehicle or a bad design, but as we'll see, it never got the upgrades it needed to keep up with other designs. In the Shock Force context, it really suffers when you start comparing it to things like Bradley or Marder or CV90. Design work began in the 1970s under the MCV-80 program, standing for Mechanized Combat Vehicle for the 80s. This represented something of a change of tack for the British Army. Through the middle of the Cold War, British infantry had relied on the FV432 armoured personnel carrier to get about under armour. The FV432 was a battle taxi. It wasn't intended to fight, it was there to transport the infantry to where they needed to be before kicking them out so they could do dismounted infantry things. By the 1970s, it was becoming clear that the combination of overwhelming Soviet mass and the likelihood of tactical nuclear weapons flying about placed a premium on faster-paced, more manoeuvrable units. The British Army needed a vehicle that could keep up with incoming new tank designs, eventually Challenger, and cut down the time needed to assault enemy positions by bringing the infantry much closer or even directly to them. The FV432 did not tick those boxes. What the Army needed was something that was faster, more heavily armed, and better protected. What would become Warrior was accepted in 1984, and the first vehicle entered service in December 1986. Though it wasn't known at the time, this was obviously near the end of the Cold War, and the initial intention to purchase almost 2,000 vehicles had shrunk to 789 of all variants by the time production ended in 1995. Warrior has seen combat service in the Gulf, Bosnia and Afghanistan, where it's acquitted itself well. It's seen several improvements since it entered service, notably incorporating thermal images for the turret crew and some heavy-duty applique armour, but the long-suffering Warrior Capability Sustainment Program drowned in acronyms for an entire decade before being cancelled in 2021. Amongst other things, this would have seen the Warrior's main weapon replaced by a 40mm cannon. In a similar vein, Warrior's only export success was to the Kuwaiti army in the mid-90s, and they were only interested in the hull. The so-called Desert Warrior completely replaced the turret, substituting it for a modified LAV turret armed with a 25mm Bushmaster and a pair of TOW ATGMs. Warrior itself is now on the way out. It's being replaced in British service by Boxer, but the focus on upgrading or changing the weapon's armament suggests that this is a weak link in Warrior's design. So we'll start with that. Warrior's principal weapon is the 30mm L21A1 Raden cannon. The 30mm cannon is not exactly atypical for an IFV, and the Raden was an established in-use design when Warrior was being developed. The 30mm armour-piercing discarding salvo ammunition can penetrate the front of BMP-2s all the way out to 2,000 metres, which is great, but the Raden falls down on rate of fire. This is to do with the long recoil design and the feed. The TLDR is that the Raden not only fires slowly, about 90 RPM, but has a maximum capacity of 7 rounds, which are loaded via 3-round stripper clips. If we compare autocannons to infantry weapons, something like the 25mm Bushmaster on the Bradley is analogous to a belt-fed machine gun. The Raden is more like the G41, an early self-loading rifle fed by stripper clips. In combat mission terms, this all translates to a very steady 3 rounds, followed by a pause to reload, which is sub-optimal. It's definitely accurate and it doesn't waste ammunition, but if the target is still up after being hit by 3 rounds, you've got a problem. And the target might still be up. The Raden can poke holes in BMPs all day long, but that 30mm APDS isn't necessarily going to do all that much post-penetration damage if it doesn't hit something important. That's not a unique problem by any means, but getting Swiss cheesed by a Bradley at the rate of 200 rounds per minute until your vehicle changes shape or burns is a much more significant emotional event than Raden tapping you 3 times and breaking for tea. Warrior does carry some 30mm high explosive to go along with the APDS. Again, this isn't ineffective, but HE effects are pretty difficult to quantify in combat mission, and we still have that low rate of fire. When engaging infantry, it can be difficult to get good effect on target because of the flat trajectory of the rounds. Altogether, the vehicle carries 225 rounds of 30mm ammunition. In Shock Force 2, that's split into 180 rounds of APDS and 45 rounds of high explosive. Not the ideal mix for your average Shock Force mission. Just to round off the list of subpar main weapon characteristics, the Radan is not stabilised either, so firing on the move is not going to be very effective. Warrior also mounts a coaxial machine gun to deal with infantry and light targets. This is the L94A1 chain gun, which in reality suffers from a pile of technical issues, including but not limited to firing on its own with no warning. Thankfully, we don't need to worry about that or a lot of jamming in combat mission. It does have a noticeably lower rate of fire than other coaxial MGs, up to 550 rounds per minute, which is the lowest setting for something like the M240. But that's less of a concern than the rate of fire on the cannon because the chain gun is at least belt fed and can keep the fire up. The chain gun is chambered in 7.62 NATO, and the Warrior carries about 2,000 rounds of it. So that's the Warrior's firepower. It should be pretty obvious why it was on the list of things everybody wanted to improve. Obviously, this is the loudest, most exciting component of any armoured vehicle, so it gets the most attention, especially in a video game environment like Combat Mission, where we're all focused on the last couple of kilometres and making things go boom. But that's not all there is to Warrior. Looking at the turret as a whole, we have the gunner on the left and the commander on the right. They both have thermal imagers and plenty of viewing prisms, so spotting and visibility are good. This, combined with the Radan's accuracy, allow them to get good hits in, just not enough. There are also some smoke launchers on either side of the turret front. These will put down a smoke screen about 20 meters ahead of the turret's frontal arc. This smoke is not multispectral, despite what the manual says, so Warrior can engage through it if you don't feel like fighting fair. In terms of protection, the Warrior's actual hull is aluminium. Again, not uncommon for IFBs trying to keep the weight down, but in SF2 Warrior comes with one of two add-on armour packages as standard. The basic model features some applique armour, which consists of some very chunky plates fixed to the sides of the hull and some of the front. The engine remains uncovered to prevent it overheating. The armour plates are apparently made of Chobham armour, which is the same kind of composite used on Challenge 2 and Abrams. In Shock Force 2 there isn't a naked Warrior to do any comparative tests with, so it's difficult to tell exactly how much protection it adds. In practical terms, the plates seem to help Warrior withstand longer ranged 30mm fire from BMP2s, but they don't stop heat warheads from ATGMs or RPGs from scoring penetrations. They might help reduce the post-penetration effects of those hits, but it's really hard to be sure. The second armour upgrade is the RAP2 package. This retains the applique armour and complements it with explosive reactive armour and cage armour, offering a greater level of protection against heat warheads. This is pretty much the same stuff that the FV430 Bulldog is fitted with. It's very much a more counter-insurgency RPG protection kind of package. Obviously it's still not foolproof. There's more of the less effective slat armour than there is ERA, and the era blocks only work once, but it's a definite improvement over the basic model. Both Warrior variants come with IED jamming equipment as well, though this is only modelled on the RAP2 vehicles. If you're lucky, this will prevent uncons from detonating radio and cell-controlled IEDs near the vehicle, which is nice, but again, not 100% reliable and definitely skewing towards that counter-insurgency environment. The added protection doesn't appear to compromise the Warrior's mobility all that much. It scored 499 on the vehicle mobility test, that's exactly the same as the BMP2 got, but Warrior also had a pig of a time with the difficult ground portion that might be skewing the results. If we disregard that, it scored 353, which is a little better than the Marder and the CV90. We're not getting the full picture though. In reality, Warrior has power-assisted braking and can stop within its own length when it's travelling at full speed. The ability to come to a dead stop is pretty useful, but it's not modelled in combat mission. If you slam on the brakes in game, it behaves like any other vehicle. As usual, it's hard to really quantify all this mobility stuff, Warrior doesn't stand out, but it doesn't need to, and it's in a good part of the ballpark. As usual with Western style IFVs, the driver is up front on the left of the vehicle with the engine to his right. Behind them is the turret. Passengers sit in the rear compartment. There's space for 7 dismounts there, and they get in and out via a hydraulic door at the back. It doesn't particularly matter in combat mission, but having a door instead of a ramp is another questionable design decision for a whole host of reasons. Further complicating things, British infantry sections are 8 men strong, so they're missing a seat in the back. Apparently the original intention was for the section leader to take the vehicle commander's position and jump in and out as the dismounts deployed and remounted, but this was about as awkward as impractical as it sounds, and it was easier to cut the dismounts down to 7 men. Each vehicle carries a load of extra ammunition, 2,000 rounds of 5.56 and 600 of 7.62, 60 40mm grenades, 12 HE and 6 smoke bombs for the platoon 51mm mortar, and 2 L2A1 one-shot disposable anti-tank weapons. The platoon leader's vehicle has an extra L2A1 and 3 L1A1 LASMs as well, because apparently it's just special. So, that's a quick once-over of the FV510 Warrior infantry fighting vehicle as modelled in Shock Force 2. In a lot of ways, it's decidedly mediocre as IFVs go. It's not terrible by any means, but it's really let down by the lackluster firepower, and if I'm being honest, the base applique armour package feels like it should be doing a lot more, given how chunky it is. Some of this is due to the way that combat mission model things, but Warrior also wasn't starting from a great position either. Viewed in isolation, it definitely suffers in comparison to other NATO IFVs, but as usual the reality is that it's supposed to be used as part of a combined arms team, supporting and supported by Challenger 2 main battle tanks, Javelin teams, artillery and close air support. Historically speaking, it has gotten the job done, but after 2003, it's only seen counterinsurgency duties in Iraq and Afghanistan which don't reflect the kind of high-intensity mechanised conventional warfare we're getting in Shock Force 2. In other words, I'm not expecting a lot from the Warriors when they tackle the platoon patrol. I think this run will come down to the dismounts, but I'd be happy to be surprised. We'll find out later this week. In the meantime, if you'd like to see these videos early and support the channel, you can do so via Patreon or YouTube memberships. Whether you do or not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.